Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the US Secretary of State John Kerry are meeting in Zurich to discuss the crisis in Syria. It's the first meeting of 2016 between the two after several attempts last year to find a political solution to the Syrian conflict. Ukraine is also on the agenda, with fighting continuing between the army and pro-Russian separatists. Well, Simon Marks joins us now live from Washington. Simon, sorry to make you a soothsayer, but is there any chance of progress between John Kerry and Sergei Lavrov now in 2016?
Well, there is an opportunity for progress. I mean, one doesn't have to stare too deep into the crystal ball to see that just the mere fact that these two men are meeting certainly gives rise to the suggestion that they can nudge things further forward. But there are still big divisions between them on the issue of those Syria talks that they have to overcome. And they've really got to drill down in a very granular way in terms of trying to come up with some agreement over precisely who should be sitting around any table when any transitional talks get underway. Now, bear in mind that the Obama administration has only recently, within the last couple of months, reached a position where it has accepted that Bashar al-Assad has to play some kind of role in charting Syria's transition, but equally it's putting pressure on the Russians to identify precisely which groups Moscow believes should be joining President Assad around the table, because Washington is very skeptical about some of those groups, arguing that the Russians are insistent throughout this process on simply trying to shore up President Assad in power and delay any transition. So they've got an enormous amount of work ahead of them.
Well, Simon, Moscow is keen for results and really pushing for that. How's that being felt in Washington? Is the time frame that Russia's working towards going to be useful for the US?
Well, you know, the Russians are essentially saying, hey, this isn't our time frame, this is the United Nations time frame. And if you look at what the UN has said, they've told us, say officials in Moscow, that we have to have reached an agreement on all of this by January the 25th, so that talks can immediately get underway. They also say that the clock's ticking and that eventually it's possible that all these time limits will have expired, and therefore there will be no agreement eventually about a time frame for discussions. The Obama administration is keen to get discussions underway. President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry late last year both predicted that talks could get underway by the end of December. That was not to be the case. These conversations between Sergei Lavrov and John Kerry provide an opportunity to indicate to the world whether in any way this process is still on track.
Well, Simon Marks with The View from Washington, thank you for now.